when when I was a kid, so my mom raised me. So throughout most of my life, it was just kind of like me and her in a sense. Um, and ever since I can remember, we had this sort of like rule at the house in which um, everyone's gonna do their best not to wake other people up. So if I were to like wake up before my mom would, I would not be super noisy. I would not be playing like loud music. I'd be careful when I was in the kitchen, so I wouldn't make too much noise. And she would do the same. So I feel like one of the easiest ways of getting grounded when I was growing up was of just not being cognizant of other people resting. And I feel like when I was a kid, I really didn't care much for sleeping. Um, but I still, and maybe it was because of this experience at the house, but I still held it in very high regard. I think where I didn't pay much attention to was sleeping at night because um, I've always been really into video games, right? And when you're in school, you're spending a bunch of your day in school. So, and then there's time after school that you need to spend doing homework or whatever it is. For me, since it was just my mom and I, she would not be able to get out of work until like 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes sometime later. So I would stay in school and sort of like they do sort of like a daycare after classes, in which that would give like the parents more time for, to kind of like pick up their kids and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I spent a very like now in retrospect looking at it, I feel like I spent a very significant amount of time in school, and then I went home and I would play for a couple hours, but then I would have to go to sleep. And so what I ended up doing at some point was that I would go to sleep. I think my curfew was around 9. I would wake up around 12 or 1 or something like that, and then I'd play video games until like 6 a.m., which is the time that I was supposed to start getting ready um, for school. And I did it in sort of like a particular way to not make much noise, but also that if my mom would were to happen to wake up in the middle of the night, she wouldn't notice that I was kind of like up playing video games. But I would sort of make up the sleep in school every day. There were certain classes that I would sleep through, and I had picked those classes in particular because the one of them was social studies, and the way our social studies class was set up, it was kind of like perfect for it, and the same for Spanish and all that. Um, but those times in school in which I slept, I like took very seriously in a sense. Like it was kind of like a bit of a pride to it. So from that, I think very early on there was this sense of importance of sleep instilled in me. And after I got to college, I think that's the point in which I really started paying attention to it, because I noticed how quick the effects of lack of sleep or sleep deprivation of whatever it is really like style to start to pile up. That if you're well rested, it's like you're superhuman in compared to if you're not sleeping well, or if you're haven't slept in a while, like you straight up start tripping. And it's like good sleep somehow helps us keep our footing in this world and in the things around us. And the further that we stray from that, I feel like we somehow like start losing our grasp. Like anxiety and all these things become, and stress especially, become a lot more difficult to navigate around. And I think in understanding this, and also like the experience of being respectful for other people's sleep, um, I think it's I think the older I get, the more my I guess, reverence for sleep grows, that I have friends and people that I care for a lot, but then I also see them that they're spending a very significant amount of time at work, and then they're having trouble sleeping, and then that's bleeding into like so many other things. That's kind of like painful to watch. But at the same time, it's also such a thing, such a personal thing, that the way in which we get the sleep that we need comes to so many different things that it's almost like a thing that we need to figure out for ourselves. That it's not just going over and sleeping for 8 hours. If we were to say that 8 hours is like the optimum for absolutely everyone, which I'd be surprised if it is, there's still other things. There's people who are really sensitive to light, so it doesn't take much light for them to wake up. So a good idea for them is to get really good like blackout shades and just like turn their room basically into a cave in which no light enters. Other people sleep without their phones, or don't watch TV, or don't watch shows, or don't sit at the computer. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. I wouldn't say that you need to do all of them, but try things out and see kind of like what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what feels right and what doesn't feel right. Another thing that I think has been pretty cool for me with sleep is that there's a lot of interesting practices that you can do with sleep and with dreams and that kind of stuff, that at some points in my life have been like exciting. Like I look forward throughout the day for things to move on smoothly, so that then I can go to sleep and try those practices out and try different things and see where that kind of like unfolds. So I feel like there's kind of like a lot to this, but for now, I think this is kind of where I'm at on this topic. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think like one of the other, I guess, big changes that happened between that stage of like school and then college, in which I started paying more attention to sleep, is that when I was in school, I used to think of sleep as sort of like lost time, so to speak. That I remember thinking that it would be better if I didn't need to sleep, because then I could play more video games, right? Or I could do more stuff that was of interest to me. And now, the way that I look at it, it's almost like I sometimes feel that sleep is as important, or maybe more important, than the time that we are awake. And that I think maybe because of some of the practices that I have explored of sleep, sometimes I even feel like maybe sleep is, in some senses, more real or more true, more of a true reflection of who it is that we are, than sometimes our experience here. That I think there's something about dreams where it's there's such absolute nonsense, but there's also like a rawness to it, like a purity, that it really helps show, in a sense, like where it is that we are in life, and where it is that we are with ourselves. I remember some time ago I heard someone say that, sort of like in the topic of like awakening, or more like in a spiritual sense, like if you want to know like how far ahead you are in the road of like growing up spiritually, like pay attention to how you behave in your sleep. Like pay attention to how you behave in your dreams and all that, because that's, in a sense, like that a really good reflection of where you are unconsciously, where you are without having to put boundaries on yourself. So definitely a topic for a little bit more exploration, and another topic in which I would absolutely love to hear more about your guys' experiences and maybe how things have changed, or how, like, what kind of reverence or non-reverence you'd look at things like sleep and that kind of stuff now.